London Letter 1. Blackouts, Bureaucracy, and Courage. London, 1st January. My first day back in England, I found myself in a train going to Birmingham, which in the last few weeks had been so severely raided. In my carriage, sitting under two little cones of light thrown on the indoor fog from shaded lamps, were two private soldiers and a middle-aged man and wife from the Midlands. The two soldiers were taking 48 hours leave, which includes travelling time. One of them was depressed and tired, had seen all of the world he wanted to, he said, kept falling asleep. The other was cheery and talkative, described with enthusiasm how a Highland regiment just before Dunkirk had put on kilts over their battle dress before making a bayonet charge. It was a beautiful sight, but what a lot of lovely stuff we had had to leave behind there. He looked at his companion, who was groaning, half asleep. "Cheer up, lad," he said. "You'll be in the roll of honour some day." The little Midland clerk and his wife, who were haggard from lack of sleep, were recounting deaths from bombs. 21 in a household of 23, and the wire that announced it had taken 2 days to come. The station at Birmingham, which I knew very well, was an unfamiliar crypt. As I groped along the platform through wheezing darkness, rain fell on me where no rain ought to have occurred. I realized that most of the glass was out of the roof. I called up a friend, found he had discreetly moved out into the country, and went out there in the night to find him. The village where I got off my bus was quiet in the misty night, a little church spire, very English, its only form of assertiveness. The air was dense with the smell of fried fish and chips, and I knew I was back in England. The next day I walked around Birmingham, feeling something of an intruder. The poorest streets seemed to have suffered most, rows and rows of toothless, eyeless houses, gutters of powdered glass. But the raiders had also got a big luxury shop, where my wife used to buy satin and swansdown. It was now a tangle of iron, a mess of rubble. From 4 o'clock on, the curbs were lined with workers, patiently standing in the drizzle, waiting for buses, as an angler waits for a fish that may never come. I spent that night in a room in the university, where several of the faculty were on ARP duty, including the Vice-Chancellor, an Australian, who entertained us by singing Waltzing Matilda, said to be Australia's only folk song. Next, Oxford, which was much the same as ever, only more crowded. It has so far had no air raids and is full of evacuees. Up to 1,000 people are sleeping in an outlying movie house. During the summer, EastEnders from London were billeted in some of the colleges and waited on tenderly by the college servants who rose for the occasion above their traditional snobbery. Rows of East End washing were hung across the Jacobean quadrangles. I had a conversation with a prominent economist and labourite who was just back from London from a committee of civil servants, and was deploring the unsurmountable timidity of that well-meaning but astigmatic tribe. No one, in these days when departmental activities interlock, will touch anything that could possibly be construed as outside his own department. No one will act on his own initiative. He has to refer to a superior. You refer back and back till you get to the minister. Pending further instructions, pending and pending. It is this bureaucratic aspect of England which is far the most depressing. The committee rooms appear to be blacker than the blackout, more dreary than the shattered slums, more distasteful, oh, ever so much, than margarine. And then London. Oh, what a shabby city, is one's first impression. So many broken windows, so many windows boarded up, the same old grime and mist, but less colour, less traffic, fewer people. Gutted theatres still placarded with announcements of forgotten shows, huge and vulgar patriotic posters, cotton and woolen stockings, and those tin hats which make their wearers look like old-time headmistresses. London, for a month, had been enjoying a lull. Faces look less strained than in Birmingham, though people, on the whole, are dour. The chief subject of conversation is food. "I have an onion. I can't decide when to use it." About the war, one could only say the obvious or swap rumours. But there are some funny stories circulating at the expense of the Foreign Office, the War Office, the BBC, the Ministry of Information, et al. Ad infinitum ad nauseam, and God helps those who can laugh at themselves. If you want a Hogarthian contrast, go down, any time after 7 p.m, into one of the tube stations, the subways, and follow it up by a visit to the Ritz bar. Night after night, the same people sleep in the tubes. The number of them is now put at about 35,000. Lying on the platform where the trains come in, their heads to the curving wall and their feet to the trains. Between their feet and the trains there is not more than a yard, so you have to be careful where you step. The sleepers lie packed together, making a continuous layer of bodies from one end of the platform to the other. They sleep in a blaze of lights and their coloured blankets and patchwork quilts. Their sandwiches and mouth organs give almost a bank holiday atmosphere, very different from that of the subways in Barcelona, where the starving homeless lay in a charnel gloom. The smell these days, I am told, is nothing to what it was. Someone remarked to me that this was really back to the village, a revival of the archaic communal life in which the tube station takes the place of the village hall. Now, for your contrast, go into the Ritz. The bar is noisy and crowded with officers in uniform, but all of a peculiar kind, shimmying their hips and speaking in shrill or velvety voices. My dear, my dear, my dear. The Ritz, however, represents a minute minority. The vast majority of Londoners lead a life these days of very hard work, immeasurable patience, and next to no frills. Every district in London has been damaged by bombs. The damage has been wonderfully indiscriminate, but it is far outbalanced, this ought to be underlined, by what has not been seriously damaged or what has already been repaired. Bloomsbury has suffered heavily, and it is sad to see those grey brick Georgian houses in ruins, but it cannot be much help to the Germans. When Virginia Woolf's apartment was disemboweled, left open to the air, I am told that for several days paintings by Duncan Grant, the rising star of the 20s, remained hanging on the remaining walls through the London drizzle and the blitzes that followed. Going to see the ruins soon becomes boring. One shattered building looks much like another, and much like any building being demolished by contractors in peacetime. And they smell surprisingly bad. But some of the more pretentious commercial architecture is aesthetically improved by bombing. A block of shops, which has been gutted, and its pediments broken, and its plate glass gone, and its arches left open to the wind, takes on a new dignity, or patina it lacked in its ancient, but so recent days of 19 and 11pence the yard. And sometimes, when a house has been cut in half, you get the pleasant effect of a doll's house, a bath in the bathroom, and a dresser in the kitchen, and wallpapers with roses and forget-me-nots, and a mirror for the dolls to look into, not even cracked, but the dolls themselves have gone. The Church of St. Clement Danes in the Strand, one of Wren's elegances in Portland stone, looks none the worse for having had its windows blown out. Outside it, in the churchyard, just beyond the apse, the statue of Dr. Johnson still stands among the debris, unconcerned and pawky, with an open book in his left hand, looking up Fleet Street. Last night they dropped a great number of incendiary bombs, stage lighting London. You could have read a book in the streets a mile away. The one fire which I saw close at hand was very beautiful. A large shop building that seemed to be merely a facade of windows, and these windows were filled to the brim with continuous yellow flame, uniform as a liquid but bubbling a little at the top of the windows, like aerated tanks in an aquarium. There were no wild tongues of flame, no reds or blues or flame colour proper, but above the building the smoke rolled up and outwards in great soft tawny clouds. Several AFS trucks, the Auxiliary Fire Service, drove up, packed with firefighters, all in tin hats, and all with stubs of cigarettes in their mouths, their last cigarette before they got down to a job that would last them the night. You will want to know about the intellectual front. I use this Stalinesque phrase deliberately. Well, there is no front. The left intelligentsia broke up in August and September 1939, and all the king's Spitfires and all the king's men have failed to reassemble it. I was asked by a well-known woman writer to support a People's Convention, which will take place shortly in Manchester. This convention apparently is an attempt to revive the Popular Front, with the Communist Party predominating. I asked why I should support this. She said because a revolution was needed immediately. I said I very much doubted, A, whether the British Communist Party could swing a revolution, B, whether it would be the right kind of revolution. Apart from which, if we had a revolution, however successful today, Hitler would invade England, and probably successfully, tomorrow. So powerful, however, is wishful thinking among the small minority of intellectuals who support such crackpot conventions that they think the moment they overthrow the present British government, the German people, sick of German victories and stolen foodstuffs, will rise and overthrow Hitler. There are other intellectuals, ex-fellow travellers, who no longer aspire to a revolution. There has lately been a slump in barricades, but would like an immediate negotiated peace, assuming that everyone, including the Germans, would be so overjoyed by a few days' peace they would scrap all their armaments at once. The majority of intellectuals, however, rest their hopes upon Hitler's ultimate defeat. They accordingly align themselves, faute de mieux, with the Labour Party, which is really more committed to winning the war than the Conservatives. It is a mistake, however, to hold the opinion, which I heard expressed in America, that the Labour Party now has the whip hand in Britain. The Labour Party is still the prisoner of the Conservatives, and has to soft-pedal its own aims for fear of frightening more Conservatives into the furtive camp of appeasement. If a general election were held today, the Conservatives would almost certainly retain a majority in the House of Commons, thanks to the prestige of Churchill. It is a paradoxical situation. The Conservative Party, which contains the chief elements of appeasement, remains in power, and so, to a certain extent, sabotages the practical effectiveness of the real war party, the Labour Party. And it remains in power chiefly because it happens to be led by a man who is as zealous for victory as any of the Labourites, although his peace aims will be radically different from theirs. It looks as if we must hope for a compromise, a pantomime transformation act, Churchill to win the war, and Labour to win the peace. It is a lot to hope for, but it is at least a better gamble than the other camps offer. People have complained to me about their letters from friends in America. They say that these friends always take one or other of two lines, both of which are absurd. They either write, "I cannot bear to think of you in that hell. How can you stand it?" Or, "It must be so thrilling to be in England at this moment. I only wish I could be with you." It is neither thrilling nor hell, though it may have its moments of either. It is more of a purgatory. Routine, routine, routine. Plenty to grumble at and plenty to admire. Some moments of intense fear, and hours and days, weeks and months of waiting and working one's way, not even to heaven, but a bit further up the spiral. You may doubt whether we are going up, but here we are in no position to doubt, and we have no time to achieve levitations by yoga. Better be hanged for a sheep than like one. I have just come across a letter from an American friend written last June, saying that Britain today seems downhill and hopeless. Having just returned to this country, I wish to say honestly, and as someone who has never been patriotic and who loathes propaganda, that Britain at the end of 1940 seems a good deal less downhill than I have ever known it before. In fact, not downhill at all.